Wow. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your girl, Aida Rodriguez. I am back with another episode of Truth Serum. Looking forward to get into this. Here we like to have the conversations about people of color, with people of color, about people of color. Speaking about our truths from our perspective and providing a spectrum of the different perspectives that live within us, because guess what? We're human beings and we're not all exactly the same. We're not a monolith. And so I think it's very important for us to have these conversations. I want to thank all of you who've been supporting the show. The support has been amazing. I never realized that so many people were going to watch the show, that we're going to share about it. And I'm just humbled by it. So please continue to like, share. Those of you who have donated, thank you. If you are in a pinch right now and you don't have any money, you sharing the content, liking it, telling people about it is worth far more than any amount of money. I want to get into this conversation. I wanted to create a space so that we can have a transhuman conversation, because I think it's very important that in our communities, Black and Brown communities, we hold ourselves accountable for our treatment of people that live within the LGBTQ plus community. But today we are speaking specifically to the trans experience. And I have 4 amazing human beings who have joined me and are going to be sharing their experiences and their point of views, in hopes that so many people who have sent questions and honestly from the best places in them wanted to know how they can be better allies and supportive of the trans community. Today we're going to have that talk. They belong to us. They belong to us. Their lives matter. They matter to us. And we are supposed to stand up for each other, and they are not excluded from that. So without further ado, I want to introduce my panel. Former Elizabeth Warren surrogate and the creator and owner of the You Are Essential movement, my girl, Ashlee Marie Preston. Hi, love.
Hey.
So he is a comedian, Choyce, who has a podcast that I love the concept. It's about women who kill, and not on the microphone, who actually kill. So what's up, Kai?
Hey,
How you doing today?
good. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. They are a writer, a producer, an actor, creator of Aristotle and Dante Discovered the Secrets of the Universe. Also, my co-creator on my animated series, a very good friend of mine. They are also from Miami, so they understand the madness. Say hello to Henry Alberto.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. This is exciting. Thank you.
No, thank you. And they have been one of the stars of the breakout series on the Stars Network, Vida, and also from East Los High. Say hello to Said. Said, I want to say your name correctly. Say it.
Anzoategui.
Anzoategui.
Spanish.
You know
In
what?
English, it's Anzoategui.
No, I wanted to hear you say it correctly because I saw you get interviewed one day. I was watching someone interview you the other day, and they just said your name the way they wanted to say it. And so I like to hold people accountable for how they say our names, just like we learned to say Hunter and Blake, and we've learned to say Ford. Then you got to learn how to say it.
Right.
So how are you?
I'm doing really well. I just came off a panel with Aida. It was about the Latinx experience, and also the nominations of the Emmys, including also the Afro Latinx, and the experience also of we got to call out when things were racist in our communities. But I'm doing great. I love the fact that I'm on a roll. I feel great.
Yeah, we're on a roll.
I feel heard.
Yeah, we're educating people today. So I'm not going to do the hokey, what do you call it? Questions that people do that ask to trans people that are because they feel weird and awkward and they want to know, well, what made you? And I don't have, you are who you are, and I accept you for who you are. So we're going to have this conversation from this point forward. We're not going back into your childhood trauma. We're not going to attribute your choices to stuff happening to you, like we like to do to people in our LGBTQ plus community. You know she gay because she had bad experiences with men. And I'm like, I'm not going to take your choices away from you. You are who you are, and I respect that. And I'm glad that you're here. So first of all, I want you to just tell people who you are, where you're from, and how you landed in the place that you are in your career, because everyone here is a valuable voice in the community. And because we tend to erase and disregard trans people so much in this society, it is quite the accomplishment that you are where you are. So I'm going to start with Ashlee. I'm going to go around the room, and I just would like for you to tell people how you started and how you are where you are, because what it does is it creates esteem with young trans people to know that they too can achieve great things in life.
So my name is Ashlee Marie Preston, and originally I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. I came out to California at 19 back in 2004, so you can do the math. And I call Kentucky the land of God doesn't make mistakes. And so I was raised in a God-fearing family. And so I didn't have language to describe trans identity, but I knew whatever I was experiencing, it wasn't safe to explore that in Kentucky. So I got out of Kentucky, came to LA, got a job, transitioned on the job, started facing bullying and harassment and all of this like ridiculousness. Got fired because it was easier to fire me than it was to address the transphobic culture on the job site. Ended up losing my job, lost my apartment, and became homeless. Most people would just go to a shelter. I couldn't go to a shelter because my definition of womanhood wasn't in alignment with theirs when I went to the women's shelter. And I was so desperate that I even tried going to a men's shelter, and they turned me away. And the 2 times that I did get taken in, I was sexually assaulted both times. So unlike some of my peers, I don't have a record. I wasn't met with any of the health disparities that many trans women of color experience. And so even though I was able to get off of the streets because I was less visibly trans than some of my siblings, so I just stopped telling people I was trans. But I didn't forget about my folks out there who took care of me, sex workers and hustlers, and all of those people took care of me on the streets. And they were whole ass people that respectability politics tend to erase, or we tend to sweep them under the rug. And so I used media as a way of telling their stories, whether it's through documentary films I'm producing, whether it's through editorial that I do for various publications, whether it is, having authentic, raw conversations on IG Live. I think it's important that we continue to uplift the voices of folks who can't necessarily be heard over all the noise.
Thank you for that. So Henry, I'll go to you.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Miami, which, as you know, is the epicenter of toxic masculinity and machismo, which really fucked with me for a really long time. And it's taken me a long time to kind of walk through what my truth is, even though I knew what it was. But I was so afraid of the rejection, like, the quintessential story of what it is to be queer and what it is to be trans. So I really waited till I was able to be in a place of privilege so I could take care of myself, where I didn't have to rely on anybody else to come out and to walk through that. But as soon as I did that, I guess I left room and allowed abundance to come into my life, because that's when my success really started to happen. And it's just there's no denying that if you're not authentically who you are, you'll never get what you want and how you want to be seen in the world. So what I'm trying to create with the work that I'm doing as a writer and as a director is really speak to queer and trans youth, because I think that that's a demographic that we tend to talk down to. And I think if we start creating content that represents them, I think we'll make their experience far easier than mine was, despite where you're from and despite what your upbringing is.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Kai?
I feel, I guess, lucky that I actually grew up in LA. I'm born and raised in LA. So I haven't really had, I would say, quite the same experience that a lot of people would have who came from less liberal enclaves or whatnot. But I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm a podcaster. I'm a writer, and I actually didn't come out as trans until fairly recently. Started transitioning fairly recently, and I hesitated for a while because I'd been doing stand-up for so long that I came to a point in my life where I was like, am I gonna have to start all over? I mean, am I gonna have to kind of start from scratch as to a lot of people as a kind of a brand new person? And I just realized, it's either start all over or really not feel like I'm ever being true to myself or to anyone else. And as far as being a comedian goes, what do you have if you don't have truthfulness? So that's where I'm at right now. I don't have a lot of I don't have books and movies and stuff like that. I mean, hopefully, but I'm just at a point right now that I kind of I'm not getting any younger, so I've got to be really honest with myself and open with myself, and I feel like the art that I can make and the media that I can create is going to be a lot more meaningful since I'm not holding anything back from myself or from anyone else.
Thank you. Ser?
Hola. I'm they, them, theirs, and I'm non-binary. I'm also transmasculine as well. And I think my experience in the being an artist, whether through the theater or television, with my experience has been figuring like really exploring myself through my work, not by like, this is what I'm going to do to explore my gender, but it just came from that. So I think, it's like a reflection of me, working through all my stuff to be like, okay, so, fully being like Kai was saying, like being authentic of who you are, stripping away all the exterior, voices and conditionings, upbringing, all that. So it's still going on. And I think because I'm still in a work in, like I'm a process of like, working through my gender identity while I'm in the media, you can see my, all my different, like when I identified as like butch, or when I identified as gender non-binary. So I allowed my own work, which is me writing my own characters, me talking about where I grew up. My mom is from Italy, migrated to Argentina. My dad is Guarani, Paraguayan, and, brown, just, and he immigrated into Argentina and moved to Buenos Aires, and then they immigrated to the United States. And I had no idea about the side of my dad's family, even though I had visited Paraguay, because it was like a shamefulness of like the identity. And so now I'm also exploring, along with a lot of people, the fact that why am I conditioned to not talk about what I need? Why am I not conditioned to just uphold the white Latin side, as well as the gender? That's continually a process. And now I'm meeting it with entertainment and the world and the activism and everything, where people are finally we're coming together and saying in the trans community and also in entertainment saying, we don't all have to look the same. We don't all have to, we are in different process, and it doesn't mean that you're trans, doesn't mean that you have the whole point is to be part of the binary, or it has a certain idea of what it may be. And speaking from my own experience, it's, it's really great to feel it and to be a part of it in public, especially doing disclosure. I didn't know I was going to be in the documentary, but the point is, even if I wasn't, it's still like incredibly a teaching tool to learn from, because it's like all the stuff I'm still working. I'm like, all the other stuff I'm still working through. It's still coming up, like things I'm working on and deconstructing, or like decolonizing and all of that. So it's a work in progress. And I think that when you really are truthful, with your art somehow, if you're not truthful and conscious, like not even aware, you're like unknown, then somehow your art is going to get you there, some one way or the other. So just trusting that. And that's what I'm doing right now. And I've created my work, as before I named myself. My show was called Said. My first solo show I worked on for 9 years, and I got me into television, and people were like, I was like really consulting on all the show, realized, wow, they really need me. because there's not that much representation. So, or there wasn't when East Los High. So I'm the East Los LA, East LA, telling my story about soccer, in the theaters, and it was getting popular over 9 years. So I really feel like I sort of influenced the storytelling, and so I feel like, you just got to keep going to find, and I feel like so many of us, I'm learning that I'm a lot of times carving, but it's like you're going, I don't know, who do I talk to about the stuff I'm experiencing right now? Like, you're literally like by myself sometimes, trying to figure out things in the industry or things for myself and my gender. And a lot of it is, unknown, and you have to allow it to come, right? As far as me, like, I was unknown of a lot of my own stuff and what I'm repressing and all of that. So yeah.
So I love what you said, because I want you to inform people and let people know some of the common mistakes that they make, thinking that they're being helpful, but that actually need to be corrected and addressed. I think it's important to hold people accountable, right? And a lot of people who they do it with all marginalized groups. They think they're helping, and they'll say, "No, and then get out the way and let me talk for myself first." That's the first thing you can do, right? But there are a lot of misconceptions about the trans community, and a lot of people love to feed the dissent. People love to feed the drama between trans women and cis women, and it comes down to what people don't realize, that trans women's lives are disproportionately targeted and taken. And it is, a lot of the dehumanization feeds that, and people don't understand that. So when someone just put a question and said, as a teacher, how can I be a better service to students when we have trans children in our classrooms? Any of you can take it, and we can just respect one another and just have a conversation.
I think one of the ways to be the most helpful is not to propagate notions of gender and like presentation and expression. I know that some of the earliest instances of knowing the difference between male, female, boy, girl was in school. Like, boys go here, girls go here. The boys are blue and the girls are pink, and all of these other things that force children into having to search for themselves in a space that's limited. And I think the other piece is not trying to correct how a child shows up in their person. I do remember also instances where like I was being told that like, no, like, don't do your shirt like that, or I remember having like a little baby ponytail and then being making remarks like, oh, when are you going to cut that, or like, when are you just things like that. I think just being universal and non-gendered in the way you educate.
What's crazy is that that continues like all the way into high school and all the way in. I remember being in college and having professors separate people in groups and be like, we want, okay, we're going to talk about things from different perspectives. So all the girls go over there into a group and all the boys go into a group over there. And you're like, okay, I'm just going to leave. But, and it comes down to the way people even talk to other people's kids, like seeing a little girl sitting a certain way and being like, oh, maybe you should sit like a lady. Like, people do that. People try to parent other people's kids with their notions of how these children should be presenting themselves gender-wise. So I think a lot of it comes down to like minding your own business and letting people be themselves.
Yeah, we have a problem with minding our own business, and specifically when it comes to sexuality in this country. We are, like I am in awe of the fact that in the explosion of what was George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, we took up so much space talking about Will and Jada's sexual reality and their family, right? And it's just like, dude, do you realize what is happening in this moment? That why do we care? We're so fascinated with what other people do in their bedrooms, and then we want to police people and what they do in their bedrooms according to to whatever indoctrination we are victim to. And coming from the Latinx community, where in Puerto Rico and in the Dominican Republic, where there's a lot of transphobia, and they, first of all, you're a fetish, and then people are scared of you. So there's the secret fetishization, and then there's the violence. And so I think it's important for us to use our voices and speak out against it. That when you see Bad Bunny wear a dress on a late night show, it's revolutionary for us, because we've been so conditioned to and to what gender is and what that says about us, and in terms of what gender says about us in terms of our power and our value. And it is just so it's just gross. I want to ask you, what is being done right now in terms of media and representation when it comes to the trans community? I know that Angelica Angelica Ross was very upset about the Emmy nominations, and so much that took to Instagram and did a live video and actually was moved to tears. When we talk about representation in the media, which people trivialize, because people will say, why are you worried about this when people are dying? But people don't realize that the images that we put out about ourselves and each other informs other people and how they treat us. So when you saw the Emmy nominations, and I don't know if you saw Angelica's video, tell me, in terms of your own experience, how does media affect you, and what do you think can be done? Because I like to be solutions oriented in terms of improving that in the media and television, film, news, all of it.
I think that in my last experience on a show that I was on, there was a huge resistance to tell a trans story. I pitched like 7 trans stories from an authentic point of view that were undeniable. But there was always the excuse that the higher ups wouldn't want it because it was too niche. And finally, when we landed on one that was good enough, everyone responded to it. And there's just like fear that needs to be unlearned that I think we're really far away from in greenlighting these stories so we could get the authentic representation on TV. And we could tell our own stories, which is something that hasn't happened for a really long time, till recently with maybe Pose and Disclosure. But like, I can't think of too many stories that are told by trans folks about trans folks. And I think that's really where it starts.
I think a lot of people, they ask, well, why does it matter? Why can't a good story just be a good story? Why does representation matter? And the thing is people who ask questions like that have never experienced finally seeing someone who you feel is like you on TV for the first time, whether it was like a few years ago or a few decades ago, and having that character exist only to be murdered or only to have something terrible happen to them, and you feeling like that's your future. That's the only thing that's out there for you. So so I don't know. I feel like it is really important to have people tell their own stories. I mean, up until like not that long ago, there were still so many white people exclusively telling Black stories and like Latinx stories and whatnot. So I what am I trying to say? Representation is important, and letting people tell their own stories is important, because I mean, if you want to come at it from a business standpoint, even we have money too, and we want to spend it to see ourselves, and the what am I trying to say? Hold on. It's important because so much of media influences how people see other people who are not like them, especially in places where people think they don't know any trans people, but they do. They just don't know anyone who feels safe enough to come out to them. So the only idea of how trans people live and exist and our people is what they see on the big screen or on the small screen for so many people.
There's also something that you said, Aida, sorry, Ashlee, about how the conversation with school, and I think that a lot of it is rooted with the way we talk about gender at home and within our POC family specifically. There's this notion of what male and female is supposed to be, that when you go to school, you're already so repressed, you don't want to express that. So a teacher could hold space for that, but it really has a lot of the work goes at home. Like it took me 37 years to, this is the most visible I've been about my transness. This is the first time that I'm talking about it openly. So thank you for giving me this space. And it took me just a few weeks ago to come out to my mother. And I felt like I couldn't do that because of everything that had been instilled in me from specifically growing up in Miami and growing Latinx, because I was never man enough. And like, that's just never who I was. So holding space for these kids at home is where it really starts. And I think that that's going to be a long time of unlearning in order to get there.
Ashlee?
I think there's a couple of pieces that I want to go ahead and see. Like, you think you slick, Aida. That's why you wanted me to come on here. Because you know I'm about to cut through the shit, right? So basically, there's a couple of things. One, again, pretty much what we've said a piece of is that most of the violence we experience is because of the stories that are being told. But I think I have to go in deeper. What stories are they telling about us? You know, we're the punchline. You know, when there's like four guys in a bar and there's a cute girl and, oh, it's really a dude. You know, we think of shit like The Hangover. We think of films like The Crying Game. So basically, there's this idea that our whole existence as trans women specifically is to, you know, that our identities are centered on our ability to satisfy a man's libido. So it's this hypersexualization. And even when we look at violence toward trans women, that isn't because a guy is attracted to us, it's because of misogyny. It's because of the idea that women in general are there for male pleasure. And so just for existing, men feel entitled, cis men feel entitled to women. You know, when we think about incel culture, it's a lot broader than we think. And so by a trans woman merely existing, it's seen as if we're offering ourselves to them just for breathing, just for daring to be visible, just for taking up space. The other piece is that these organizations need to do better. Everybody and their mama and their ancestor knows how I feel about GLAAD. And I know that this is going to shake the table a little bit because I know that disclosure.
I didn't know.
I'm going to tell you. I watched this poster because I felt that it was my duty to support it, because going back to talking about why these projects aren't greenlit, and to Kai's point, we do have money, but many times the studios and these producers don't feel that there's going to be a return on their investment. And so they're like, why even bother? And so even though I saw that GLAAD was one of their big like projects and they were a part of it, I had to push past that. But just so we're clear, when we're talking about trans identity and queer identity and which stories are worthy of being told, there's this indoctrination, even in, you know, organizations or LGBTQ media, that tries to become a microcosm of the thing that we're trying to dismantle at the macro. So we give front row priority to light-skinned Latinx folks, or we give priority to light-skinned Black folks, or the ones who are solely in the beauty industry. We're not amplifying the voices of activists and people who are actually in the trenches doing the work. Not saying you can't be in Hollywood and the trenches, but the reality is that the people who are making the decisions in Hollywood, they want to settle for this watered down, mediocre, sanitized version of what trans identity is. My biggest dilemma isn't figuring out fucking which shade of lipstick I want to wear. It's how to be able to leave the house in the morning and come home at night. It's not about whether or not I can fit into this dress and if this guy thinks I'm hot. It's about, can I even get a job so I can have access to healthcare? Am I going to be able to pay my rent? Am I going to have to go to bed with someone just so I can be able to feed myself, you know? And so tying that up, I think that a lot of the responsibility and a lot of the careful interrogation doesn't just fall on the cisgender community, it also falls on the trans community too, and the LGBTQ organizations that are part of the nonprofit industrial complex that continue to pay attention to trans identity, but they don't want to address their anti-Blackness that overlaps with that transphobia that we see ever so pervasive in society.
Yes.
Intersectionality that we continue to mention but ignore all at the same time. Ser?
Well, thank you so much for speaking on that, Ashlee, and and of course, I'm sorry, Henry. It was my first time meeting you on here, so this is an honor, though. So thank you for speaking on that and speaking, truth to power, really. As far as media affected me, I really didn't realize that until recently that, you piece it together throughout the time, but it's sort of I all of that media, like Kai was saying, it's and Ashlee, you're saying that it could be that you're the bad person, you're the one that's going to be ridiculed, you're the butt of the joke, and it's all of these different manifestations based on the cis male gaze and their own perspective of what and ever that story may be. And so when I watch these movies, I blocked it out, and I can't believe that I started unstripping that, layers by layers throughout the years, and especially now with so much more trans representation and trans activists and being in contact with and also working with and in the industry. As far as how to improve it, I mean, I've been thinking about this, and I go, why can't people that once you get in the room, once you have the power, once you are the star, or once you have the writer that you could write, that says, I need trans people to be involved in this production, that says that we need non-binary, we need a percentages of such people that we need, we need this representation of trans and gender non-conforming people behind the scenes. And not only that, why can't we have programs I know that, there's Transparent that was doing that. I haven't worked on that project, so I'm not exactly sure, but it's more say, hey, you got directors, you got, those kinds of in unions within the industry are so hard to break into. It's why can't it be that you hire somebody that trains somebody and gives them the knowledge? Because sometimes you can't even get into school, can't even, like you were saying, actually can't even get healthcare. I can't even open up a bank account sometimes, all these things that you come across. And so that's something that I was kind of thinking about, when it comes to how could people make a change, or how do we do this? If I can't have the power, then we can find people that have the power, and then maybe they could be the allies that could include us, or, as more people rise, they could actually say, we include this in our package. You want this right now, you want this project, we're pitching this to you, you want it? Well, it comes with this, this, and this at the forefront, just like the the Dante Gill story that was, Scarlett Johansson was didn't end up making, and now it's Our Lady J that's writing it and penning the pilot, and they made it that the person that's going to be playing the star, who's Dante Gill, or the story, the main character, is going to be a trans man or a trans person. So it's that's what I'm talking about. Now we can do this, and we have these kind of different ways that maybe we could think, how can we, within the structures that we have, right, the systems, what can we do to bring more power into these structures, and to have more control into yes, trans people should be telling trans people stories, Black people need to be telling Black people stories, and that kind of situation when it comes even to disability. I'm trying to be hey, I'm gonna come in. What's my blind spots here? You know what I mean? It's Afro Latinx, the Caribbean, so many different people. Maybe I leave out when I think about Latinx, or it's the disabled. The fact that I don't even see or think about disabled, my ability. I do all these things. Let's stand with you. Well, a lot of people can't stand. So I'm trying to do stuff of that, so that I also am practicing what I preach when I say, hey, you cisgendered people, what about trans people and other gendered people and intersex people, and so.
Why is it important for people like Scarlett Johansson and Halle Berry, who also stepped away? why is it important? Hollywood needs to understand why it is important for transgender humans to play transgender humans. And in addition to the fact that it's a damn job and it's already hard enough to get a job when you're a trans person. So now when they portray you in Hollywood and your story, they're going to go get a cisgender person to play that role too. But I think that when I say it, I'm speaking for you. So I want you to speak for yourself and just let people really understand why it is so important that not only they're in the writers' rooms, they're in the producer chairs, in the director seats, but they're also in front of the camera portraying the roles.
I think one of the biggest issues is that it reinforces this caricaturized culture of who we are. So we aren't caricatures. So, prime example, when you see Jared Leto going out to get that award for Dallas Buyers Club, he's doing it with a full face of hair. You know, not that again that women can't have goatees or beards, but I mean to the cis-normative through the cis-normative gaze, they just think, oh, that was all drag. It's a costume. It all comes off. And then, to your point, they're stealing economic opportunities from a community that on a national average makes less than $10,000 a year. And so we're already looking at the ways in which we've been erased from being able to make money in just like regular societal places like retail or, you know, an office but then when we have that one shot, for those of us who are creators, to tell our story or to add that layer of authenticity that has been missing, we're even deprived of that. And so essentially, you're capitalizing off of trauma porn, because even when you look at the stories that are being told, they're stories that don't present us as whole people. We're always presented as having this, and not that those stories aren't important for people who are still searching for identity, right? However, you would think that of all the stories that have been told, we would get presented with a trans character that doesn't have an internal conflict, you know, based on who they are, that their actual conflict in the storyline has nothing to do with their gender, or that we're not there as an extension of someone's sexual, you know, deviancy, or just different things like that. And so I think ultimately what makes it problematic is that when we tell them that it's hurtful, when we tell them that it's harmful, they push back the way Scarlett Johansson did and does. You know, when we continue to talk about the pain and suffering that we go through, and then J.K. Rowling still feels that it's necessary to step up and then say some fuck shit that's going to further propagate the notion that trans women are really just men who are trying to take up space from cis women, we really have to drive in accountability. But I think what makes it difficult is that some of the trans folks in Hollywood, they don't always want to say what needs to be said, because it's this fear of, this is my opportunity and I may lose it. And so what I would propose is that they start speaking up, because again, we need to stop subscribing to respectability politics authored by institutions that will never respect us. So you may think that, you know, you have, you know, they may make you feel special for 5 minutes, but they're going to move on to the next thing eventually. And so I feel that people on the ground need to support people who are in Hollywood and really uplift them and support them, so that when they do speak up, they're supported and they're not erased and never heard of again. And I think that people in Hollywood, the trans folks in Hollywood, need to also stay connected to the community and stop letting white executives in Hollywood tell you what your journey and your story is, and to keep it authentic by staying plugged into the base.
That's right.
I think that shit's real. I think that it's also really exhausting when I'm 16 weeks in a room pitching a fucking story and all these people are minimizing that. And when it gets to the point where it's greenlit, you're like, fuck, it's more important to tell this story than to keep fighting that this episode needs to be directed by a trans person and not a cis white queer person. It's just like there's a level of exhaustion that also prevents you from fighting the fight all the way through. I mean, I take responsibility for that, but when you're in those rooms, it's really, really difficult.
So I wanted to say this because a lot of the work of white supremacy is to divide and conquer. And so if you watch this whole thing with the Emmys, you see Latin people screaming, but the Black people got this. And then when they're talking about Pose, they bring up Billy Porter got nominated and, Angelica didn't. And so we are constantly fighting for the scraps while they feast
Yes.
at the top, and so we keep turning to another marginalized group and saying, but they got that. And I'm really trying to use my platform to unpack that and really address it, because you don't have to point out that another marginalized group is getting something in Hollywood to say we deserve a space as well. Because today we did a panel today, and there were some blind spots. And on the panel, Fed spoke up because there was no LGBTQ plus and trans representation, and there was no Black representation. And we were talking about Latinx people, and there was a blind spot. So two people offered to give up their seats, right? An Indigenous woman and a gay man, right? They both offered to give up their seats. And I was like, no, add more seats. Add more seats. You don't
Why
have
give
to
up?
And just like that, 11 people were on this panel where it normally would have been 9, because we have this Black mentality that there's only room at the top for one, when we know good and goddamn well that Hollywood is about money. So if tomorrow a bunch of trans shows showed up and them motherfuckers were making everybody rich, white people would be like, all the trans people are getting all the shows, right?
They already are giving that. They're already giving that by us asking for one role, or for one, to Henry's point, for us to just produce one thing, or like to be the director. And they're like, but. And it's just like, I think it's based on, again, this idea of meritocracy, this idea that all you have to do is just pull yourself up by the bootstraps and work as hard as we did, but you're talking to the bootless, as Dr. King would refer to it as. You know what I mean? You're talking to folks that haven't been afforded, we haven't even been afforded basic dignity and human respect and rights. You know what I mean? Let alone an opportunity to prove how brilliant and multifaceted and talented and gifted we are. And so I think that's also part of the fear, is that trans folks are divine. We're brilliant. We're not just coming from this boring, watered down, single axis, way of looking at the world. We bring so much with us. We are a culmination of all of our world's most beautiful attributes and aspects and all of that. And so they're afraid that they're going to get shown up. That's what
that's so real.
I'm so tired of hearing, like, when people, we were talking about the Emmys, they were like, well, Jarrell Jerome won an Emmy last year. That's one for the Black Latino team. And we're like, or that is on Vida. You know what I mean? And it's this like, do you understand? We have a full realized spectrum. Like, there are trans people who don't want to wear makeup or fake nails. There are some trans people who dress up from top to bottom and cover their bodies and are very demure in their dress. There are some people who don't snap when they make an appointment, and it's just so hard to live in a world in our skin as people who belong to marginalized groups, when all you see is that's being put out. And the crying game, for the love of God, just instilled the fear of trans women into people and weaponized it as if it is a ploy to take straight men down, knowing good and goddamn well that if you are just trans attracted, that is what you are. And there was no glamorizing like True Blood to make you do that. So I'm sorry.
We don't have to. It's such a good show.
I'm taking this space. So I'm letting y'all, because I read, I'm angry, I'm politically activated. Ben Carson and his brainiac ass HUD created a guideline on identifying trans women for proposed rule allowing homeless shelters to deny them entry. So this is systemic, right, to the utmost degree. And so this is, you walk around in your skin and laws. I went into a bathroom in New York City. There was a 6'5" white man in the bathroom using the bathroom. And I remember, because it was a bathroom for everyone. And one of the people were like, trans people use that bathroom. And I was like, I'm more scared of the straight white guy that's in here that's bigger than me. I've been molested 3 times. I ain't never got molested by a gay or a trans person. So the demonization of trans people constantly, I'm sorry, I'm taking up space, but I think it needs to be said because I'm talking to people like me who are cisgender, and we perpetuate this. When people take that away from you, and with the bathroom controversy and demonizing transhumans as if they are demonic or perverted or there to molest and abuse children, I really want you to speak to that, because it is, for me, it is infuriating and it's condescending for me to say that, because you have to live that shit.
And the funny thing about the bathroom situation is that it's just people don't realize that they're hurting themselves with that argument, even because to say that you need to look like enough of a woman or enough of a man to use this bathroom kind of puts people in the a target on people who are cis and don't look super masculine or super feminine. So I find that funny. But yeah, I think I don't understand it. The people who, on one hand, want to always ask trans people uncomfortable questions about their bodies, and then on the other hand, still say that a trans person using the bathroom next to them is very uncomfortable. It's like, so do you want this person to do you want to know what's in this person's pants, or do you want to be scared of having them pee next to you? Because you can't have it both ways. But also, I think most people have a unisex bathroom at home that they're fine with everyone using. So
I love you. I always love Kai, though. Kai goes in on Twitter. Ashlee and Kai are on the opposite side of the spectrum, because Ashlee will get up there and she'll Albert Einstein some shit. She'll be like, 70% of the 14% divided by the, and I'm like, I can't keep up with her ass. And then Kai will be like, with one of the darkest jokes ever known to humans. And it's just so fun to live in a world where you both exist. I do want to speak to this.
Yeah, so I think really quick, a large part of it is that the reason why this administration can spew so much transphobia with impunity is they're uniting their bases, because we don't want to admit that trans identity is the one thing that America can agree on that's you know, I guess like a joke or unworthy of being taken serious, or, you know, it's basically how they can unite one another through hate. And it is the trans community. And not only that, but talking about intersectionality again, and for those who don't really know what that means, intersectionality describes multiple threats of discrimination when someone's identity overlaps with multiple marginalized groups. So I'm not, as the way that I've always said it, racism, sexism, and transphobia don't line up and wait their turn. They strike simultaneously. You know what I mean? And so the thing is that when you allow Black trans women to get murdered, you're inviting fuckery into the women's rights movement. You're inviting fuckery into LGBTQ liberation. You're inviting fuckery into Black liberation. You're inviting fuckery to immigrant rights, because there are trans refugees and immigrants who will literally be put to death in their countries, and this is the only opportunity that they have of surviving, you know. And the other piece too is that I think we need to have an honest conversation about the fact that we keep saying we want to destabilize white supremacy, but that's bullshit. I think a lot of communities want to sit next to white supremacy. They want to be able to access the benefits of white supremacy. But if you were actually trying to dismantle systems of anti-Blackness, xenophobia, transphobia, homophobia, fat phobia, ableism, and all of these symptoms of social sickness, you would not be transphobic. You would fight for Black trans lives. You would fight for immigrants and refugees. You would fight for reproductive rights. You would fight for all those things, because we need to realize that those forms of bigotry were actually not even necessarily created for Black folks. They were created to siphon off power and wealth from other white folks. So white supremacy will eat its own young. And I think that that's the conversation we're not having. Like, when we see poor white folks who want to be mad at immigrants and they want to be mad at Black folks, and be mad at your motherfucking self because white supremacy sold you the fuck out and threw you under the bus. You were the sacrificial lamb so that the folks at the top can. And so those are the conversations that really, leaving here today, I just had to really just insert that, is that we need to really get honest and interrogate ourselves about what our true intention is. Do you want to abolish these systems of oppression, or do you want to extract the benefits from it and then attempt to discard the ones that are harmful to you? And it doesn't work like that.
Said you were going to speak.
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that too. It's like a lot, you know, to process, right? But thank you for speaking that too. I was just kind of wanted to just add, just with the Latinx experience, you know, we were talking about, you know, what the issues sometimes could be when we are talking on Twitter, or we're talking about, you know, our issues and that kind of thing. Sometimes I feel like I say, you know, Latinx people, and I think about, you know, we started playing Oppression Olympics, you know, and it starts to be like the victim mentality, like, you know, what about this and what about that, you know what I mean? And I think it's important though, within that, as we're talking about, you know, why John Leguizamo's comments are problematic, or why, you know.
Ooh, John Leguizamo didn't like that. No, I'm joking.
But you know, you could also like break that down, and the Hispanic caucus completely leaving out Black people from Latin American experience, like, hello. And so that is very telling about where we're at right now. If the Hispanic caucus of our country is saying we have not had any Latinx nominations in the past 6 years for the Emmys. Jarrell Jerome just won last year, you know. It was just like really like jarring, and it was like, this is the, you know, more of the work that I'm gonna be focusing on too, because we know it, but it's like, you know, then there's like Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, what I'm talking about, or Black Lives Matter. You could be like, we're gonna do focus on the Oka Project, you know, well, there's also like this deep, you know, seated racism within our Latinx community. And so I think this victim mentality sort of like takes a lot. And I'm one of the people that's like also decolonizing that within myself, like really looking at how I'm becoming across and really am being in that moment and trying to break them patterns, because that's where I'm at. Like, how do I learn how to love as we're holding ourselves accountable? I learned that through Black people. I didn't learn that through like Latinx, I learned it through Black Lives Matter, you know, members, and I was in my own community. We fight, and we, you know, and I'm like trying to change that around. And I think a lot of people are in that too. You know, we're trying to change it around, but still like going, okay, this is very uncomfortable. We also have to hold each other accountable, and also be not canceling each other, and really hold people to that levels of accountability that are within us, and through these different systems as well. And we talk about systemic gendering, like the U.S. Supreme Court, the court say you can't enter this courtroom unless, if you're a woman, you're dressed a certain way. They say you have to wear whatever is acceptable. You can't wear pants or whatever. Like, it's very like Handmaid's Tale, like, you know, and that's like a really like, what? And then I was like, have to remind myself that, you know, even though we know what's going on and what Trump has been saying, that we still don't have equal rights with our gender. Trans, non-binary people, we can be denied healthcare. We do not have equal rights. And another thing just about the Latinx experience that I think is important is just that I've been hearing some of my own folks, like being Latinx, saying, you're too sensitive. Trans people saying this and that, y'all are too sensitive. But yet when Trump says stuff about Mexicans and Latino people being criminals and all that, then it's like, oh, hell no, and we got to take them down. So it's sort of like, okay, so we got to be like looking at where we're picking and choosing what we're doing here. And yes, just like, and we have stand-up comics in the house, and I know that, you know, we have stand-up throughout the years. Stand-up comics have been so transphobic and continue to perpetuate the same anti-trans stereotypes and all of these conditionings they throw in out there, and they claim the First Amendment, right? First Amendment. And it's like, yes, and I was that person too, you know, and I'm just like, but there is a thing as such as hate speech, and there is some, this is like where we have to really like keep on carving or keep on cutting them, use a machete, and like we need to, and in a way that's not like not violently, I'm saying it like we have to really keep exploring these things that we, you know, the dominant culture has been exploring for us and has been saying who, you know, trans Black women are, trans Latinas are, but we are the ones here saying we are who we are, and it's shifting. And, you know, people can love Dave Chappelle, but can we hold Dave Chappelle accountable? I don't know.
You can, I can't, because I'll get blackballed. But go ahead.
Me too.
I think so. Here's my thing on that. And I love that you named that, Sarah. And I think that that's why, like, this platform, Aida, is like so important, because I have a thing. I agree. In fact, anybody who knows that I literally showed up, me and Patrice Cullors, and shut down Charlamagne the God on MSNBC stage when they tried to play my sister Janet Mock, like they was getting ready to like when Lil Duval was on there. Because first and foremost, don't let some of these watered down narratives get your ass whooped, because I'm not the trans woman that's going to let you put your hands on me, or never will I be in a space that I allow you to put any of my siblings' life or safety at harm. That's first. I just had to issue that disclaimer. Second, the thing is, it became real for me when there was 1 week when Drake, Common, Neo, LeBron James, Dev Hines, all of these Black men were saying these beautiful things about trans women. And I wanted to pitch a story to editors who I was also friends with about the way that we're starting to see a social shift, and how the Black community is starting to try to embrace Black trans women. Not a single editor will let me write that story. But let Kanye's mental health act up. Let R. Kelly pop off and get in Gayle King's face. Let Dave Chappelle come out with some trashy shit, or and everybody's beating down my inbox to write about it. So right now, and I don't know that I have an answer for this, but I personally felt that some of my barriers to calling that out publicly is that I'm tired of enacting white supremacy on other POC for white consumption. And they set us up like that sometimes, where they were literally, well, what about Black on Black crime? You know, all this shit they like to say to try to play us against one another. So I think that we do need to think about, what does that space look like? I know some of those spaces look like spaces that are Black spaces, or Afro-Latinx, or Latinx, or, you know, having our own spaces where we can actually try to heal those things. Because I've always said we can't heal what we don't reveal. But there is reservations for me in dragging other Black folks publicly, because they're just waiting, chomping at the bits to be able to use that shit against us.
Yeah. So I mean, the show went by like this, but I don't want to end it now, because I think it's important to have this conversation, because people's lives are depending on the portrayal and the understanding of the humanity of trans people and trans humans. So I want you to tell me what you think are some challenges to trans rights activism, and some positives in the activism, and some of the things that cis people can do, and people who are interested, because I see a lot of damage to trans people by the LGBT community itself. And I mean, people don't realize that racism exists in it all. And so when you talk about the LGBTQ plus community, you know, there are a lot of white gay men who are rich and don't identify with the rest of the group, and it's like a hierarchy, like they're beneath us, because that's the way they do marginalize people, right? That's also the divide and conquer. But racism is not, you know, it's not it's part of the whole thing, as you said, Ashlee. I'm losing my words because I get angry. And one thing I wanted to say in holding Latinx people accountable, because we, like a lot of Latinx people claim their racism, But a lot of Latinx people are self-hating Black people who call it racism, but don't call it what it is. And it is self-hating because they don't want to admit their Blackness. And so when we hold them accountable, there is the white racism that exists in the Latinx community. And then there is a faction of our people who are Black people who don't want to call themselves Black people and come up with all kinds of names for their Black, not to say Black. So we just got to call a spade, pun intended, a spade. So let's talk about activism, and let's talk about, in your space where you stand, how you see people being better allies, creating, and I want to know about policies and practical ways to help, because the lofty idea of, I just accept you the way you are, that's what white people have been saying to Black people for generations. It's not, I don't need you to accept me for who I am. I need you to get out of my way. I don't need you to be my friend. I need to be able to get a loan, a job, a decent place to live, a valuable education, healthcare. That's what I need. You don't have to like me. That's where I differ. I don't need a hug. I don't need a pat on the head. I need you to get out my motherfucking way so I can live a decent and honorable life. So when people want to know how they can help, please let them know how they can help the community in practical ways and in ways that make sense, that can really enhance the lives of transhumans in this society.
I think one of the things that I've gained is working from a place of cross-cultural collaboration. Like right now, I'm gonna be petty, but I just saw somebody in the comments said, this person has tweeted so many racist posts that she deleted gross. I know you're talking about me, and the thing is that 10 years ago, I was not the same person that I am today, because first of all, I was a kid. Second of all, we have to get to this place where we realize that we all have the same common enemy, and it's white supremacy and the ways in which it shows up in social settings and systemic settings. And so when we fuck up and we get it wrong, we need to be given more grace and compassion and ability to grow and evolve and join forces and build together than we give white supremacy, because we afford that to white supremacy. So why don't we afford that to ourselves? That's why the Gina Rodriguez's and the conversations that you will never see me really, like, I'll be side-eyeing, but I will never come out and do white supremacy's work for it. So please stop doing that shit. That's that. And so with my organization personally, You Are Essential, that's what we're doing. We're saying that even as a Black trans woman, it's not enough for me to just care about trans issues. I'm on the front line for immigrant rights. I'm on the front line for reproductive rights. I'm on the front line for folks who are incarcerated, even though I don't have a record. I'm on the front line for folks who have health disparities. I'm on the front line for the homeless, even though I'm housed. You know what I mean? Like, there's all of these things. We have to get to this place where we stop tearing each other down in a way that doesn't give us the opportunity to grow and evolve and mobilize our respective communities to show up on the front line of the fight for all human rights. And so that's what it is. We cannot continue to be single issue advocates or single issue voters, but we have to be able to look at white supremacy and the many manifestations that it shows up as.
Okay, Henry?
I think Ashlee said everything. I didn't know that the fucking comments were here, so I was like totally in it.
Honey.
No, I think Ashlee is always so eloquent, and I always kind of refer to you, even if we don't know each other, on like exactly what the point is. So I value your perspective.
Said? Can you hear me? Kai?
I don't have a solution, but yeah, I mean, Ashlee said it. She said a lot, and it was all very accurate. I find one thing that is always interesting to me is when you know, going back to the Hollywood thing, is when people say things like, "Oh, so if they're making The Little Mermaid, you expect them to cast a real mermaid to play her," as a parallel to casting trans people to play trans people. And that tells me two things. It tells me, one, you don't see trans people as people, because mermaids don't actually exist unless you also believe in like the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. But also, you know, if you're making a movie about firefighters and you happen to get a submission from an actual firefighter who can also act real well, aren't you gonna cast him? Like, it's the same thing. Like, the transness is not a costume. It's not it's not you know, it's not something to be used for someone who is really trying to get an award, who has no relation to, no experience with the community. It's a facet of a person, and you shouldn't have to start from scratch to develop the basic human traits of someone and then build on that. You know, as an actor, you should already kind of be in the know a little bit. But I mean, aside from that, I don't know of a solution other than, you know, amplify trans voices. You know, share people's content. That's a big thing. Is sharing content that online that includes perspectives of people who aren't normally heard. If someone is asking for recommendations about who should I check out, you know, on Twitter or social media, you see it all the time. Who should I check out? Who's like a new comedian, who's a new artist or whatever. And then you see people recommending a long list of people who are already famous, like they're not easy to find. So I mean, that's a big thing. It's just like supporting the community with by helping them get their voices out there, because I mean, content is king right now, and that's a big thing. Is just reaching more people with your voice.
Thank you, Ser.
Yeah, definitely. Content is king, or content is queen, or however, or maybe just not even the royalty phrase, but yes, I totally agree. Is what I'm saying is, I think that content is key. Like, really, like, if you continue putting out the content. One of the things that I did to understand how television impacts policy and legislation is I took a workshop with Aida Rodriguez, the artist, and she really broke down and the way that television shows lead to pretty much 8 years as the marker. 8 years down the line, it leads to a change in policy or a change in laws and that kind of thing. So it was great to embrace that and to know that that's the power of television, you know, altogether. And people are like, oh, look, Modern Family came out 8 years later. We have, you know, we have the right to marry, you know, same sex and that kind of thing. So that's really important to remember. I just think also within entertainment and activism, it's becoming like, you know, this within the last years. And I think we're discovering a lot of what those relationships look like, what it means, or what could be done, and what to explore in this sort of like unknown, you know, we haven't explored it yet, like kind of deal, being in some positions and being able to have a platform and that kind of thing. But I also think that when I talk to my people that are activists on the street, like, you know, Latinx and that kind of thing, or maybe, you know, front lines, like, they discredit my work as an artist within the same movement. And I think that we really need to embrace each other doing our own work within our own lanes, still holding each other accountable if we're anti, you know what I mean? Like, you know, you're not really, whatever, you're being anti-Black, like, you're not really including Afro-Latinx, like, however, but really, like, embracing that we have our own strengths and that we can get into that room. You never know, next week I could be on or whatever, and all of a sudden I have a bigger platform. So that's sort of like where I'm at. Like, I've tried to build bridges with some people, but it's like it could be that because I'm light skinned, you know, I also have to like take a step back down, or it could be because maybe the gender kind of, they may have some issues with transphobia or whatever that they don't recognize. So it could be a lot of things. But that's kind of like where I'm, what I've been thinking about lately, you know.
Can you amplify some of the names right now of some of the activists who are on the ground that don't have the benefit of celebrity, but do the work every day? I like to do that here. We always call out the names of people that you should know and follow who are doing the work, because truth be told, many of us, when our jobs come back, we're going to go back to being the artists that we are. And then those people will be still doing the work that they've been doing forever. So please call out the names of some of the people that people should know and follow. Anyone?
I can go. I just feel I kind of take up a lot of, so like I'm trying to just like
take the space.
Okay. So basically, there's just what's the weird thing because some aren't celebrities, but they're still a growing presence on social media. So I'm just gonna say who I appreciate and learn from. And there's way too many to list, so please don't be mad if I don't mention Sonya Renee Taylor. Definitely Hope Giselle, who's a brilliant Black trans woman. I think of Sharon. I can't think of Sharon's last name. She's in Philadelphia. She's this trans woman that does a lot of stuff in community and is amazing. I think of oh my gosh. Okay, I'm on the spot and now my mind is like clouded. I think of Aaron Lang. I love Aaron Lang. I think of yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that because I'm kind of like blah.
Anybody else have any names they want to?
Future Com, Patrice Colors, like, yeah.
Anybody else have any names they want to call out? No? Okay. I can't hear you, Kai. You're muted. Okay. Did you say something? I didn't hear you.
No, I don't have any. I don't have any off the top.
Okay. So before I go, because I am a stand-up comedian and I do belong to that community, and I do believe in holding people accountable, including myself. I said a joke on the Young Turks that was received by some people as being transphobic. And my joke didn't come from the perspective of attacking trans people, but defending them, because I was talking about Caitlyn Jenner and how Caitlyn Jenner has used her privilege to exploit the trans experience. And, you know, there are people who are poor, who don't have the benefit of what Caitlyn Jenner has, who are Black, who are Latino, who are living on the streets. And so that's what fueled the joke. But I'm going to share the joke with you right now quickly. And I want all of you to tell me if you feel like if it's a transphobic joke, so I can retire it, because I have not, because I have a certain animus toward the Kardashian evil establishment. But the joke was that I felt that Kris Jenner is a pimp and she pimped all of her children. That she made vagina so lucrative in that household, she made Bruce Jenner want to go get one. I saw Ashlee's face.
I knew the answer though when you asked.
Well, this is the condescending thing that people who don't belong to the groups do, right? Because in my mind, I'm speaking out against someone who's exploiting trans people. But I had Charlemagne on the show, and I addressed Charlemagne's transphobic commentary, right? We had that conversation. I'm not exempt from that, because as I think about it now, because I'm having a conversation with trans human beings, that dehumanizes trans women, that it trivializes the sexuality of trans people. And even though I think I'm telling the joke, I'm using myself as an example and putting myself on the line, because I feel like it's a teaching moment for straight people, cis people, or the people who make jokes about gay people and trans people or whatever. It never dawned on me that I was doing that. And I thought I was championing trans people, and it didn't help that some trans people would support the joke without me thinking that there are some self-hating trans people. So I just want you to tell me, because I am not beyond correction.
Yeah, I mean, it's transphobic. You dead name Caitlyn, and you also make it about what's between her legs, which is like counter what the point is, you know?
Okay.
So
I think the other piece too is that, and it wasn't just you, and I appreciate you being, you know, open and kind of like putting it out there. I saw a lot of LGBT folks do that shit too. Like where they were just like, oh, you know, her old name. And it's just like, okay, but if you do that shit to her, you will do that shit to me. All it takes is for me to say one thing. And I even saw other trans folks being like, well, yeah, that's different, Caitlyn. And it's like, but is it really? Because when when it's all said and done, Caitlyn's going to be safe, tucked away up in that mansion in Malibu. We're not. And so we're going to catch the fallout of whatever happens with people's, conflation of trans identity with, being counterfeit.
And being real about it that's what matters to me, because I don't give a fuck about Caitlyn Jenner. But because you said that, and not Caitlyn Jenner because she's trans, or not Kris Jenner because she's a woman, but because of all of this space that they take up and soak up when we have so many issues when it comes to the Black people, the Latinx people, and all this stuff. But because of, I've had interactions, and I'm just going to leave it there. But it does matter to me how what I say affects you, every person on this panel, because I consider you my friends and your lives matter to me. So if me saying that, even though I'm attacking Caitlyn, it's going to trickle down and affect your everyday life, then the joke is dead. And that's what I think we need to do, because I mean, I'm not beyond correction,
Well, I think the whole thing is, when we think about comedy historically, comedy was meant to punch up, not down. And so this is the same conversation that I've been having with, with Duval's camp and all of them, is that it's kind of just like, when we think about punching up, we think about the ruling class. We think about folks who have the power to destroy us and kill us and have been doing so with impunity. And trans people don't have that kind of power. We don't have, just like when people say like Black folks are racist, like we can't be in that sense. We can be biased, we can be, express bigotry, but we can't be racist, because that is a system based on power and the oppression of marginalized folks, and we just don't have that power. So when we actually drag transhumans through the mud for at the expense of someone else's idea of humor, we're driving another bullet through their chest, or taking another slice of the blade at their necks, and so I think that it does require consciousness and just understanding that that those words live in the space for a very long time, and it takes us, each time we tell a joke like that, it can have a 5 or 10 year shelf life, what I mean, that takes all of our lives.
Well, so I make it my business not to apologize as a comedian, because for me, it's important that we hold the space where comedians can say things that do push the envelope, but at the same time are accountable for the things that we say. And so I apologize to you, because if I said something that will put you in danger, people who I care about as human beings, I certainly have to own that. And when you said, Ashlee, you're not who you were 10 years ago. That joke is a joke that I wrote 10 years ago now. So when Kevin Hart apologized, and he is not who he was 10 years ago, does Kevin Hart also get his apology accepted? How long is the penance? And I say that with everybody, because the thing is that if we don't have a room for growth and grace and empathy, and because I do think that Kevin, I know people who don't have any regard for trans people or gay people in the comedy community. Those are the same people who don't give a shit about Black people and brown people and indigenous. They tend to be the same people who all they do is talk shit about every single group and call it comedy. But I don't think Kevin Hart is one of those people. So when I and Kai, you're beholden to a fraternity, if you will, of people who usually say things that are offensive, and a lot of people use comedy as a tool to educate people. I want to know, how do people who have said things like myself, who have been insensitive to the community, start building, healthy relationships with the trans community and creating trust, so that they can believe that, like myself, is a true ally?
Well, I think we need to not cancel people so immediately, and this may be controversial to a lot. I don't want to look at the comments, but
I turned it off because I was going to dive in like Trey Songz. I think
I think we need to engage in conversation and educate. And if we cancel people too immediate, we're missing the opportunity to do that, and in turn becoming the oppressor that we're fighting against. So if we're not talking, we're not learning, and people are going to retreat even further to ask questions. So we need to sort of everybody just needs to listen a little more gently.
I am going to dive into a comment real quick. just because someone made the comment that like, oh, it's ironic that this panel is about representation and you couldn't think of one person to shout out. Here's the thing: as a Black trans guy comedian, I know one other Black trans guy comedian, and that's why we're doing this. So, and I mean, he doesn't need my shout out, but I mean, you guys can look him up. Look up D'Lo. He's great, but he's also an activist. I know one other activist. I'm not an activist. I'm a comedian. I know one other Black trans male comedian who also happens to be an activist. So it's not that, it's the fact that that is one of the main reasons why we're doing this. But as far as what people can do in comedy is, if you say something fucked up, apologize and mean it, but also don't expect everyone to accept your apology, because you should always have the option to put your apology out there. But just like in life, if you do someone dirty, they're not entitled to accept your apology.
Yeah, I received that. So I think it's important to have these conversations, because I think that, I mean, every single one of us represents some sort of marginalized group. There's intersections here, and in the landscape, the greater landscape of things, we are all have been a caricature at some point. When I think about being a little girl and seeing chattel and seeing, a woman that is Latin, being over sexualized, and always her bosom being focused, and an accent, that we don't speak English. It just, after a while, it tears down, because all you do is see images of yourself, and we are clowns, and we're not fully realized human beings. And so I have the privilege in this country of being a cisgender woman, whereas the marginalization for you goes yet a level deeper. And there are a lot of problems in that. But I also think that there are a lot of good human beings out there who just don't know. And the more they know, the better they can serve the greater cause to, further, the respect for all human beings that fall under all of the labels that we are creating and continue to create. So that what people don't realize is that these labels are not being created out of sport. It is really for the effort of making people feel seen and heard and included. And that's so important. That's so important to me, that this has been the longest show that I've ever done, because I just feel like it's so, my uncle was gay. He was a Puerto Rican man murdered in a hate crime in 2003. He raised me. They took my father away from me. People think things like this are antiquated. Like, oh no, it's 2020. Trans people are everywhere. And it's like, no, we're
this conversation has just begun. Yeah, this is just starting. This conversation is the beginning of it. We're not everywhere in any capacity. When we start seeing doctors and we start seeing lawyers that are existing visibly, then we may start being everywhere. But this conversation is just the seed of it. That's why there's not many of us to call out, to Kai's point, but there's 4 of us here. There's 5 of us here, 4 and an ally, and that's a lot, I think, to start. So, we could only do the work so much. You got to meet us halfway, and you got to do your work too. And that comes.
Something really quick that Henry said, though, that I got to this place where I learned to hold people accountable and hold them at the same time.
Yes.
So it has to be this balance, because again, we have to give ourselves more grace, afford ourselves more grace as POC than what we get out there.
Yes.
And we afford it to white supremacy. We quickly forgive when capitalistic structures and all of these folks and brands and Chick-fil-A and whomever else, all these folks do these things to us, and we're just like, oh yeah, well, so why can't we do that if it means saving our own lives?
Yes.
Oh, beautiful. So I would like everybody to know where they can find you and continue being connected to you, because you're instrumental and important. And I want people to support your art. Truth Serum gets shared a lot, and we get a lot of viewership. Like, by the end of the evening, a lot of people will have watched the show, and I want them to take you with them. I want them to follow you. I want them to support your projects, your organizations, and to invest in the communities, invest in the community, because economic power is what we need, because through economics is how we really make a way for ourselves. and trans people are marginalized in a way where they're really affected because they can't get jobs and they have to turn to sex work. A lot of times they don't get the opportunities. And hire a trans person today, direct a trans teenager to housing. A lot of trans women are exploited in human trafficking right now. Like, we have to just speak about it. So tell people, every single one of you, what you're doing, how they can support you, and how they can follow you. Go ahead, Kai. I'll start with you.
So stand-up is not really a thing right now, but I do virtual shows. They happen occasionally, and I talk about where you can find those on my social media. But you can find me on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram. Too old to be on TikTok, but I'm on TikTok. I also have a true crime comedy podcast called Women Who Kill, where each episode I talk to a new guest about a murderer who happens to be a lady, because there's just too many true crime podcasts about dudes killing people. So, I like to let everyone know that ladies can be terrible too. What else? You can find me on all the socials at Kai Choyce, and that's pretty much it.
Okay, Serum.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for having this, Aida. First, I want to commend you because you have been such a great moderator and speaking up, to a lot of injustice and being our ally, and not just an ally, but an accomplice. I really appreciate that. And thank you for introducing me to Henry, because, to be honest, the first time that I've met and known about Henry, and now I'm going to be wanting to know more about what you're doing and everything. So it's really hard. It's like I'm echoing what y'all are saying, Kai and Henry, that sometimes it's really, we're doing a lot of work already. And just like we want Black people to be represented in all these panels talking, but they're also working on the streets and doing all these things. You can't always expect people to do the work all the time. And I'm so grateful that you brought us all together. I would say on social media, I'm on Instagram, Ser Anzoategui. It's SERANZOATEGUI. And I'm on Twitter now. I just started a few days ago getting more involved with Twitter, and so I gave up doing Facebook and moving more into those spaces. And I plan to explore TikTok. I want to really get into it.
I love it. Henry.
I'm on Twitter and Instagram at It's Henry Alberto, which is here my handle. I deleted Facebook because fuck Mark Zuckerberg or whatever his name is. But I'm a writer-director, and this has been the luckiest year of my life. I was in the Little America room, so hopefully, if all goes as planned, I'll have my first episode of television on Apple TV at some point next year. It's all dependent on COVID. I'm also directing my first feature film based on a book that I love and adore called Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. I just adapted another book, which is the first middle grade book of its kind about a 12-year-old trans girl called Grace Philly Grayson. So I highly recommend you check all that out. And then I'm working on an animated series with Aida. It's been a busy year, so I think I'll be very busy for the next coming year. So yeah, follow me on social.
Thanks. Ashlee.
So be sure to check out a documentary that we just wrote out that I'm cast member and executive producer of called Disarm Hate. It's on Amazon, Google, YouTube, most streaming services. Also,
say it again.
I'm sorry.
Say it again. What's the name of it?
So the documentary is called Disarm Hate.
Okay.
And it talks about a lot of ththese issues that we've been talking about. And then also be sure to check out youareessential.org. It is, we're funding grassroots organizations across the country who are on the front line serving vulnerable communities disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and the conditions that existed pre-pandemic. Also, you can find me on Instagram, Ashlee Marie Preston, 2 E's. On Twitter, I'm Ashlee M. Preston. And on Facebook, I have my profile open because I'm always open for conversation.
Well, I thank you for being here. I invite you to come back so we can continue to have these conversations. I think sometimes people will have a conversation one time and be like, that's it, I did my deed. And I don't think so. I think, like Henry said, this is just the beginning, and we have to keep having these conversations. We have to keep unlearning. We have to keep unpacking. We have to keep, just keep.
I can't. What was just posted in the comments? I can't fuck with it.
Oh, so listen.
There's like a Bible verse, and it's intense. Sorry, Aida.
No, I know. It's fun. So what I will say is this: is I appreciate you, commending me. I will say I don't need to be commended for this. This is my duty as a human being. I feel like it is important for us to do that. We don't need to get props for, employing our reason to magnify the humanity of our fellow brothers and sisters. And as a host of a show that prides itself in diversity and inclusion, who am I if I don't have all the voices on the show speaking for themselves? Because allies, being an ally, as Van Lathan said, is moving out of the way and letting you speak for yourself. So I received that. I appreciate it. But at the end of the day, it's like giving somebody props for being a good father. You're supposed to do this if you're a human being, right? So I urge my viewers and my listeners, listen. Just be quiet and listen to other people the way you want to be heard, and give people an opportunity to express themselves and their humanity as whole people. They're people. They are people. I have to say this in my rooms when I go into pitch, when I'm talking about people that are Latino, Black, trans. I always end up saying they're just people. They're just people. And it's so hard to get that across to people who see us as shells. So anyway, I want to say thank you for coming here today. I want to invite you to come back, not to just have another a performative panel on trans talk, but to come and just talk about everyday life shit from the perspective of trans humans, because you got to show up every day in life in every aspect of it. And it's not exclusive to what you do in your bedroom or your mirror. So please come back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate y'all. Henry, I'll see you in a little bit.
See you in a little bit.
And
Bye.
thank you. I love you all.
Love.